Doom Eternal has so far, without a doubt, been my 2020 game of the year, and unless something really surprises me, I doubt this will change. It's not even close. I love Doom Eternal. And as of a few days ago, the new Doom Eternal DLC came out. Hey everyone, as always, Jarek here, and welcome to Doom Eternal: The Ancient Gods. Calling Doom Eternal: The Ancient Gods DLC is a little misleading. Yes, it is downloadable content, but this is more like your old-fashioned expansion. I just got done streaming this game through one sitting, just marathon it, and it took me around 5 hours. For DLC, that's really good. I mean, that's longer or the same length as some old expansions like Half-Life Opposing Force or Fear Extraction Point. This DLC could not have come out at a better time for me because I finally got a 3080. I was able to get one. If you don't know anything about the 3080, it's one of Nvidia's new GPUs. It's more powerful than the GPU I was using before, which I was stuck at a 980 Ti, so I was bottlenecked for my GPU. But the 3080 was impossible to get because bots picked it up the very moment it went in stock. But somehow I was able to get my own, which is a huge upgrade from my 980 Ti, and it's just in time for this DLC. So what you're seeing here are completely max settings with the exception of HDR, as my monitor does not support it. Except this is footage from my stream, so the bitrate isn't necessarily that great. Regardless, you should get the idea. This game looks gorgeous. That shouldn't really be much of a surprise. Doom Eternal was already a good-looking game. But the expansions didn't just take places from the base game and say, alright, here you go, have some more. Instead, they made new environments that look amazing. This DLC is split into 3 different chapters, each around 2 hours long, and for each chapter there are different environments. It keeps it nice and varied, it looks good all the way through, and some of the set pieces just look stunning. Though my biggest complaint on the tech side of Doom Eternal: The Ancient Gods isn't necessarily the graphics, it's the audio. As many of you know, Mick Gordon and Bethesda had a falling out, and Mick Gordon no longer works with id Software. This is well documented if you really want to do some research and figure out what happened. The point is, whoever has to fill this role has some huge shoes to fill that no one can. This is sort of like Marty O'Donnell leaving Halo. How do you replace Halo's original music? How do you replace Doom Eternal's music? How do you replace Doom 2016's music? You can't. Nothing will be that good. With that said, I do think they hired the best replacement they could have gotten for the situation. They hired Andrew Hulshult. While listening to the DLC's soundtrack on its own, it's actually pretty good. I don't think it's anywhere near as good as the original soundtrack in Doom Eternal, but again, those are some high expectations that are really hard to match. But the interesting thing about the DLC's soundtrack is that I just didn't hear it while I was playing the game. I don't know if this DLC is just mixed really poorly or if the new music just doesn't really mesh with the sound effects in Doom Eternal, but it's really hard to make out the music in between all of the combat. Even when I turned the sound effects down, the music was still really hard to pick out, and that's a little disappointing because it is really good. So I'm not sure what's going on here, but that's definitely one of the things I want them to work on for the second DLC. This was after I got the game running. See, sometime in between when Doom Eternal launched and now, Bethesda updated the game, which broke something for me. I spent all night when the DLC came out trying to get Doom Eternal to even run. For whatever reason, I would click play on Steam and nothing would happen. No error message, nothing. This gave me virtually nothing to work with. I had no idea why this wasn't working. I tried everything. I updated my drivers, I rolled back my drivers, I uninstalled, reinstalled the game, I downloaded DLL files to put into the base folder, I was running the game in admin mode, nothing worked. That is until I realized I wasn't getting an error code because the game wasn't even launching. What was hanging was the id Tech launcher that opens in your system tray, doesn't pop up on your desktop, just in the system tray. That was what was hanging. The solution was to find the id Tech launcher in that folder and run that as admin as well as the game. I'm fucking mad. I do all that work and that's the solution, god damn it. Before you come at me and say this is why console gaming is better, because I always get those comments for whatever reason, this DLC launch had some bugs on both PS4 and Xbox One as well, so it wasn't just a PC issue. But whatever, the game runs, let's enjoy it. So this expansion starts at the end of the base game. I highly encourage you to beat the base game before you go to this expansion, or you are going to get stomped. Hell, if you were like me and the last time we played this game was around launch, you might want to warm up a bit before you go into the DLC. I didn't do this, and it took me a good 30-40 minutes to get back into the swing of things. Since this is DLC that technically starts after you've beaten the base game, they straight up give you everything right away. All upgrades, all runes, you have it all, which also means that they're throwing every enemy at you right away. These levels are far more intense than the base game, and I love this. It's almost like it heard the vocal minority complaining loudly that the game just doesn't give me enough ammo and that I have to listen to the rules the game tells me. And instead of backing down and say, okay, sorry, we'll make it a little more casual for you, they just doubled down. There are more enemies now. You still have to do resource management between your armor and your health and your ammo. The Marauders still exist, and now there's 2 of them. I actually found this to be the most fun I've ever had of the Marauders. Fighting 2 of them at the same time is more enjoyable than fighting 1 of them in a group of other enemies. I almost feel like this is how it should have been to begin with. Anyway, my point is, if you came into Doom Eternal and you made any of those complaints, this DLC is not for you. To be entirely honest, Doom Eternal as a game isn't for you, and it wasn't made for you. Doom Eternal is a game that sets rules for you to abide by and then challenges you as a player. At some point, all of these rules click. You're swapping weapons on the fly, you're moving all around enemies, and at that point, it's too late. You love Doom Eternal. This is just your life now, and you are going to marathon this game. It is hard to stop playing. Oftentimes when people are complaining about Doom Eternal, in my mind what I'm hearing is, I refuse to learn the rules of the game. I refuse to improve as a player. I just want a casual experience that rewards me with the end of the game. This is why I say if you made those complaints, Doom Eternal wasn't aimed at you, and I love the fact that it doubled down on this DLC. It not only said, hey, we are making a shooter advertised towards people that have played shooters their entire lives, 20, 30 years, however long that may be, but it also proved that things don't have to be casual to be accepted or to be good. Lots of new people got into the Doom franchise because of this game. People don't only want a casual experience, and it's not the first time we've seen something like this be accepted. I mean, Dark Souls happened and the whole advertising for that game was prepare to die. To put it bluntly, if you liked Doom Eternal, you are really going to like this DLC. If you liked Doom 2016 more than Doom Eternal, you probably won't. Personally myself, I just can't even go back to playing Doom 2016. To me, Doom Eternal is such a massive step up in every imaginable way. Doom 2016 is just unplayable to me now. With the exception of the bosses, I do think the bosses were better in Doom 2016. But yes, the gameplay. The best way I can describe this DLC is that it feels like the master levels, but for one entire expansion. That's the style of gameplay you're going to get. It wants to challenge you. It's not incredibly difficult. Playing it on Hurt Me Plenty is what I feel should be the normal difficulty for the game. Most games nowadays put the normal difficulty where hard difficulty is. For example, when it comes to Halo, Heroic is the difficulty intended to be played at by the developers. However, since most casual players are immediately going to pick normal difficulty, they want to make that a little bit easier so more people will play the game. Yet this DLC doesn't do that. Normal difficulty forces you to understand the mechanics and execute properly or you will die. Then when you understand these mechanics, you can really challenge yourself with the difficulties above it. They're all unlocked by default, by the way, so if you're already well accustomed to Doom, just go right at it. With that said, they didn't really change the Doom dance they had in Doom Eternal. It still is more or less the same gameplay, but there are a few things to mix it up. This DLC occasionally throws some gimmicks at you in the form of new rules, like having to stay inside of a green bubble and fight enemies, but pretty much every time they did this, I found it enjoyable. There were really only a few big shakeups as far as the gameplay is concerned. The first one is that there are now occasionally empowered demons that show up. They seem to happen at random, they don't really change anything too much, they're just slightly stronger demons. I like these, they're definitely a priority to get rid of before the demons around them. But while we're talking about priorities, the big addition are the spirits. This is an entirely new enemy type. It's one that is definitely going to be the biggest challenge in the game. These spirits are able to possess any demon it wants, and once that demon is possessed, it's buffed to all shit. This is your #1 priority, get rid of it right now or you're going to die. Once you finally do take down that demon that's been possessed, the spirit pops out. And then you have to Ghostbuster its ass with a microwave beam for the plasma gun. This is the only part of this enemy that I actually don't really like. The problem is you only have one way to get rid of it, one upgrade for a specific gun. And in my case, it basically meant that I tried to never use the plasma gun in case one of these enemies came around. And I don't really like limiting one of my guns. That said, as a whole, it's a nice addition to the regular Doom Eternal enemies. I do have 3 complaints about Doom Eternal. 2 of them are kind of me nitpicking, to be honest, but I have to have something to talk about. I can't complain about the game too much or Doom Eternal fans will attack me thinking I hate the game. First complaint, platforming. It's actually perfectly fine. I don't really have any complaints about platforming at all. I always found the complaints about platforming in Doom Eternal to be a little overblown. At worst, it's a mild nuisance. I'm completely indifferent with it being there. I actually enjoyed the platforming more in the DLC than the base game because the fights are bigger and more challenging than they ever have been. So it's a nice change of pace and gives you a little bit of time to breathe. With that said, there's a few platforming puzzles that I'm not really a big fan of. These are those puzzles that have you asking, where the fuck do I jump to? You also have to do them fast enough or it resets you to the beginning, which is a little annoying. With that said, minor inconvenience, whatever, once you're past and it's not a big deal. My second complaint is this thing. Remember when I said the game occasionally throws new rules at you? This is one of those times. You have to shoot the eye in the middle of this cube, it drops the floor, you punch it into the bubble. Yeah, you have to do this with 4 different cubes and enemies are attacking you the entire time, and honestly it just kind of feels tedious. It was never angering, just kind of felt like work. But again, it's a minor inconvenience at worst. It's something I'm really stretching for. I actually barely remember the fact that this happened until I looked at the VOD. The one real complaint I have is one of the bosses in the game. With this boss, you're trapped in a room with tall pillars with 2 different spirits possessing 2 different demons, and also a new enemy type that stuns you. This is a really good example as to why enemy placement is so important. This one enemy ruins the entire fight. Players in general don't like enemies that restrict your movement. This enemy up until this point hadn't really been that big of a deal because you could dodge their attacks and they're pretty easy to get rid of. But in this case, you're effectively stuck in some tall hallways with spirits running at you and lasers trying to hit you. May I point out the only way to kill this enemy is to wait for it to do its strong attack and then headshot it with a strong weapon while all the other enemies are trying to kill you. And even when you do kill this enemy, it respawns. Adding this extra enemy was a bit too much. Your defensive options in Doom Eternal are all either movement based or offensive based. It's either attack them and take them out before they can damage you, or dodge their attacks. An enemy that actively removes that ability in the middle of a boss fight is something people might not like. Another really great example of this are the obnoxious witch brides in Serious Sam 3. No one liked these enemies because they stopped you from moving and dodging attacks, which is just frustrating to deal with. And that same sort of frustration was exactly what I was feeling for this boss fight. I'm complaining too much. Do you think people will assume I hate Doom Eternal now? Obviously, I love this expansion. My only complaint is about one of the bosses. It gives you more of Doom Eternal and elevates it to the next level. It gives you a bigger challenge, it gives you new enemies. Everything you'd really want is here. And before you ask if there is a story, I'm not spoiling anything, and I also don't think people are really going to be too concerned about the story when buying a Doom game, but it does exist. And let me state that this DLC is The Ancient Gods Part 1. The ending is a massive cliffhanger. Again, no spoilers, but the type of cliffhanger is the good kind. It's not the Halo 2 kind where it just suddenly abruptly ends. They're throwing something at you. You'll have to play it to find out. One more thing, as my good old buddy old pal Adam Kara said, I can't believe they have you punching trees when you have the obvious solution. Speaking of Adam Kara, he made a pretty cool Doom Eternal video. I'll link that down below in a pinned comment. Go watch it, do it, it's pretty awesome, I demand. So yeah, there's Doom Eternal, The Ancient Gods Part 1. I greatly enjoyed my experience, enough to marathon through it in 5 hours as I'm streaming, and I wanted more when I was done. Thank all of you that joined me over on Twitch while I was streaming this. I had a lot of fun streaming it. If you want to join me in the future, my Twitch is twitch.tv/JarekTheGamingDragon. If you subscribe, you get to see my videos ahead of time. Same thing with my patrons over on patreon.com/Jarek4. Thank all of you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.